and an increasing number of risk locations across Greater Sydney, the Director of Public Health has now declared the Greater Sydney area medium risk from midnight tonight. Now, as we announced yesterday, the Northern Beaches area, which is a part of the Greater Sydney area, remains defined as a high risk area within that medium risk zone. Tasmanians can return home from the Northern Beaches, but other travellers cannot. It's now listed as high risk as of yesterday. Anyone that's an essential traveller coming out of the Northern Beaches would need to apply through the Good to Go app and seek an exemption. Now, what this means is that from tomorrow, anyone who travels to Tasmania from the remainder of the Greater Sydney area, other than the Northern Beaches area, will have to quarantine for 14 days from arrival in Tasmania. If you have a suitable residence to quarantine in, you'll be allowed to quarantine there. If not, you'll be placed into government facilities at your cost. Importantly, if you're going to quarantine in a suitable residence, other people in this residence who haven't travelled with you will not be allowed to quarantine, will not be required to quarantine at this stage. However, you must ensure that appropriate social distancing occurs. As I've said, if you don't have a suitable residence to quarantine in, you will need to quarantine in government accommodation for 14 days at your own expense. The remainder of New South Wales will remain as low risk for now. Now, I do want to say I understand the consequences of this decision. At this time of year, I'm certain that there are many people, maybe some in this room, that were expecting people to travel through New South Wales, certainly from those areas that we've just declared. It is unfortunate, but I make no apology for doing the right thing in terms of the health and safety of Tasmanians. The situation in New South Wales does continue to change, and as has been indicated today, additional cases. Importantly, I'm certain that there will be further advice that will be provided by the New South Wales Government in terms of this on an ongoing basis. Now, importantly, cases associated with this cluster have been in other parts of Sydney, which is one of the key reasons and concerns for public health, and there's every likelihood that the number of cases will continue to increase. So, as I've said, the Director of Public Health has decided that as of midnight tonight that the level of risk will be lifted to medium. He's done so based on the evidence to date and to ensure we continue to protect the Tasmanian community. Now, I do want to talk just briefly about the Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Obviously, these developments will be very challenging for the organisers in terms of that race and whether or not it can proceed. Our public health officials in Tasmania have been in discussions with the race organisers, including early today, before these additional developments and changes to the risk levels of Greater Sydney have been clarified now. I understand they'll be speaking further with the race organisers soon to fully understand the impact of these developments, but it's clear that these conditions would make it very challenging for the race to proceed. However, that is ultimately a decision that will be made by the race organisers. But as I said yesterday, regardless of whether you arrive in Tasmania on a plane, a boat or a yacht, the rules will apply evenly to everyone. I do want to just speak about testing very quickly. Our testing rates are starting to increase, which is pleasing, albeit I accept that it is being driven somewhat by concern around what is occurring in New South Wales. But I would encourage anyone that has a sniffle or any form of mild symptoms to get tested. Importantly, that as testing is increasing, the Department of Health has made some changes to its Hobart testing clinics. The PW1 testing clinic was due to close and move tomorrow afternoon. That clinic will now remain and until at least Tuesday the 22nd of December, with a review being undertaken that Tuesday evening depending on demand. The new testing clinic at the corner of Melville and Argyle Streets will open as planned on Monday the 21st of December from 10 a.m. and we'll be running the two sites as bookings only testing on Monday and Tuesday to cater for that increased demand. As I've said, this has been a difficult decision under the circumstances, and I'm sorry for those people that we're going to affect as a result. However, the health and safety of Tasmanians is our first and foremost priority. I'll take any questions.
What about the residents that might be from Greater Sydney that are already here?
They've all been contacted, those that have arrived in the state since the 11th. There's been a number of text contacts asking them to get in touch with public health, and we're working with those people on an individual basis.
How many people is that?
Look, as the director said yesterday, it could be up to a couple of hundred people, but we're working through that and making contact with people.
And so will they have to isolate, or are you going to do it on a case by case?
It'll depend on their circumstances and where they've come from within New South Wales, but that'll be a matter for the Director of Public Health to work through.
What is the Greater Sydney region?
Well, it covers off around 5 million people, but I'd refer you to the internet and to a map of the suburbs involved rather than reading out a voluminous list of sites.
What does that mean for people that might be flying home for Christmas but might live, they might just have to transit through the airport? What's your view on that?
In terms of transiting through the airports, we've allowed that right through. And so in terms of Tullamarine, that has remained open, and we've obviously had flights through Tullamarine through the period. And in fact, we were bringing Tasmanians back through Tullamarine. So as long as you remain in the airport precinct, and don't enter the broader area outside, you won't be classed as having entered the area that requires quarantine.
So the airport is included?
The airport is not included, is what I've just said. They haven't been included right through, and transiting is okay.
No, I mean, is the airport included in the Greater Sydney region?
Look, in terms, I'm just trying to think of the map. I think it might be, but transiting is fine.
So what measures are being carried out on arrivals into Tasmania? Is there temperature testing, COVID testing as well? Or?
Well, the standard, in fact, I came through the airport only last week, and it functions very well. In fact, on arrival, you will need to have completed a Tassie travel pass if you're coming from anywhere else in the country or from low-risk New South Wales. That pass asks you a series of questions in terms of your whether or not you have any symptoms. And when you arrive in Tasmania, you go through a health check. You're asked if you've got symptoms, and you have a temperature check.
So no COVID test on arrival at all?
COVID test is it determined if by public health on the basis of somebody having symptoms. But there's no mandatory test. There has not been.
The New South Wales Premier's comments about extending their lockdown beyond Northern Beaches, was that the catalyst for this? Did that put any pressure on public health to make this decision?
Look, public health have been engaged with the New South Wales public health officials throughout the course of the day. As I've said, they briefed me extensively this afternoon. It's unfortunate that we need to make this decision, but it's one that, as I've said on many occasions, we will act early, we will act swiftly. And importantly, the advice from public health right throughout the last 10 months has been very sound.
Weird question, what happens if someone arrives at the airport in Sydney, then they get out and go straight in a car and leave the area? Is that counted as transiting, or is that like a weird legality problem?
Well, it sounds to me like they have left the airport precinct if they've climbed in a car and they've driven away from the airport, if that's the question that you're asking me.
But if they don't get out in the Greater Sydney region and continue on to wherever they're going, is that still counted? So there was legalities about getting on the Spirit when you drove through Victoria. If you drove through, it was fine.
Well, what I'm concerned about is whether or not they drive back to the airport and get on a plane and come to Tasmania. What they do in New South Wales is a matter for them.
In terms of the Sydney to Hobart, if crew members are from Greater Sydney, do they have to have a COVID test on departure and then arrival?
Look, the rules will apply to anyone arriving in Tasmania, whether they come on a yacht or whether they come on a boat or whether they fly in. And so in terms of where they've been in Sydney, whether it's in the Northern Beaches area or in Greater Sydney, if that's the case, then they would be treated the same as anyone else arriving in the state. And that's, as I've said, will make it difficult for the event, but ultimately it's a decision for the event organisers as to whether or not the event goes on.
So if it does go on, will a little mini hub COVID testing clinic need to be set up?
No, I'm sorry, no, you're not hearing me. What I'm saying is that anybody arriving from New South Wales, whether it's from the high risk or the medium risk area, will need to quarantine. And on that basis, as I've said, it will be very difficult for that race to continue, but that's a matter for the race organisers.
Thanks, everybody.
Look, thank you.
So, Premier, so how many do you think are here, residents from Greater Sydney? Do you have those numbers or not yet?
Look, we don't have those yet.
Yeah.
As of yesterday, as I said,
There's 200 from the beaches.
we're expecting 200 from the beaches, but at this stage, I don't know.
No. Thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis.